the Nike Pegasus Trail 5, a shoe that has minor updates on paper, but they make substantial differences in the performance of this shoe both on road and trail. Before I jump into my review of the Peg Trail 5, let's step back and talk about the history of the series first, because that's what I do here, but it's important to know where the shoe's come from and what it's been to understand where it is right now. And the Peg Trail originates here in 2019 from the Peg 36 Trail GTX. Now, Nike Trail launched in 2014, so the Pegasus addition to Nike Trail took about 5 years. So both the series and Nike Trail in general are actually still fairly new compared to the rest of Nike running. Now, the promise of the Peg 36 Trail was that it was a beefed up Peg 36. It was a Peg 36 that was familiar to road runners, that they could take road to trail and start to explore trails with. And really it was a Peg 36 with a more beefed up upper, and in this case a Gore-Tex upper, and it was the only option for this. There was no non-Gore-Tex upper version of the shoe, and a lugged outsole. And I will say that this was a wonderful shoe for doing just that, road to trail. And in fact, in the winter of 2019-2020, back in New York City, this was my primary daily trainer to run in all that snow, slush, ice, salt, and everything else on the streets of New York City in the winter. It was the perfect shoe for that. And also it's the only application of a Gore-Tex upper that I like on a running shoe is to run in snow. And this was really optimally perfect for that. And in 2020, we got both pretty substantial updates to both the road peg and the trail peg. But the Peg Trail 2 saw some substantial changes as well. It became a much more trail-friendly shoe. And in fact, it got a substantial redesign that made it not really look like a Pegasus anymore. It looked like something altogether different. There's some of the silhouette that's here from the Peg 37, but it's its own shoe. In fact, it was much higher stack for a Pegasus, and it was probably the highest stack trail shoe in the Nike Trail line, so much so that a lot of Nike Trail pros were actually doing their primary training in the Peg Trail 2, and they were racing the Peg Trail 2. Because at the time, the Wild Horse and the Kiger were just not this much foam. They were not this much performance oriented. And this is before the Ultrafly or the Zagama were, really in the lineup. Another big change with the Peg Trail 2 was that Nike removed the airbags completely from the Peg Trail line. So this was just a pure slab of React foam. I owned a pair of these. I actually thought it was very bottom heavy, but I enjoyed it. I liked running in it. I did a lot of trail running in this. This was the shoe that I moved to Taiwan with. So I spent a lot of time on very technical trails in the Peg Trail 2, and it worked really well. This was also the first Pegasus Trail that I think a lot of people said felt better as a road runner because you got a pure React foam experience. I didn't necessarily like that, but it did really set the precedence for the Peg Trail to be the preferred road runner over the standard road Pegasus. In 2021, we got some minor updates to the Peg 38 and we got a Peg Trail 3. The Peg 38 was just an upper update really, though it did detune the midsole. The foam was a little softer, the airbag was a little bit softer. Again, Nike was trying to step back from the aggressiveness of the Peg 37. And with the Peg Trail 3, it was kind of more the same. The upper was streamlined a little bit, the foam of the midsole was softer. It just became less performance oriented and back to that real road to trail, casual trail use case. And again, I think a lot of people really loved running on the road in the Peg Trail 3 because it was so soft, it was so cushy. And in 2022, we got, again, some substantial changes to the Pegasus line, both on the road and trail. The Peg 39, again, was continuing Nike stepping back the Pegasus from the 37, making it again more neutral, more stable, more general of a daily trainer. And the same is true for the Peg Trail 4. This was taking all of the raciness out of the Peg Trail and really stepping it back to the promise of the original Peg 36 Trail GTX, being a more beefed up Pegasus that road runners could take road to trail and start exploring trails in. You can see that the silhouette is similar. It's not quite the same, but it's similar. And overall, this was a much more sort of beginner-friendly trail shoe from Nike Trail. And in 2023, we got the minor update from the Peg 39 to the Peg 40, which is the upper change. Otherwise, it's the same shoe. And the Peg Trail 4 just got more colorways. It was the same shoe. There were no changes to the shoe in 2023. And this brings us to 2024, where we get the Peg 41 update and the Peg Trail 5 update. And in both these shoes cases, this feels like Nike bringing both these series back to really what the original promise was. The Peg 41 is now returned to that very stable, very neutral, all-around daily trainer, very much picking up where the Peg 35, 36 left off. And the Peg Trail 5 really feels like a more built-up version of the Peg 41 for road runners to begin to explore trails with, very much what the promise of the original Peg 36 Trail GTX was. And both these shoes are very, very good. But there is something that I really wanted to explore between these two shoes that I was really curious about. But I wanted to start with the Peg 41 first and get a bunch of time into that shoe. Now, I have over 200 miles or 320 kilometers in the Peg 41. I know that shoe extremely well. So it was time about a month ago to pick up a pair of Peg Trail 5s and finally run in them. And that change is this. We saw through the leaks of the Peg 41 all last fall into really January of this year, this as the Peg 41 prototype. It has a extremely different midsole tooling on it. In fact, if you look at them side by side, you can see that the midsole tooling of the Peg 41 prototype and the Peg 41 are extremely different. Now, through almost all of the leaks of the Peg 41, we saw the prototype edition, the black shoe on the left. But sometime around late February, March, really just a couple months before release in June, the Peg 41 midsole actually changed pretty drastically to what you see on the right in the Volt colorway of what actually released. That's a pretty substantial change. And when you look at these two shoes side by side, you can see the massive change. Nike said this was due to stability and performance. And at the time, I was quite worried about this because this was a big switch very late in the game. But what was really curious is that the Peg Trail 5 actually released about a month before the Peg 41. So the change in the midsole tooling for the Peg 41 happened, I think, right as the Peg 41 is going to production, which means the Peg Trail 5 was already in production. So as you can see here, the Peg Trail 5 maintained that older midsole tooling. And this got me really curious to now experience what the original Peg 41 prototype tooling really felt like. And it is very, very different. With all that background information finally out of the way, we can now get to this shoe, the Nike Pegasus Trail 5. And starting up the specs on this shoe, we have 37 mil foam in the heel, 27.5 mil foam in the forefoot, giving you a 9.5 mil drop. But I'm going to say the real feel of this shoe is a true 10 mil drop. This feels like a Pegasus. There's really no surprise here. It feels like a high drop shoe. According to Nike, this shoe comes in at about 10 ounces or 286 grams in the standard US men's size 9 reference size, which happens to be my size. And as you can see from the pair that I actually own, my left and right shoes are both below Nike spec and they're actually the same weight, making this the first Nike shoe that I've run in 2024 that has exactly the same weight between both the left and right shoe. And I think that speaks to something I noticed in this shoe is that the build quality and the fit finish of this shoe is probably one of the best Nike shoes I've seen in quite some time. I'm a big Nike fan, but Nike shoes have had very spotty fit finish and quality control for a couple years now. But this shoe, the quality, the fit finish is just very well done. This is a beautiful shoe, and it's one of my favorite looking Nike shoes in some time. And for the overall ride of the shoe, I'm going to still call this shoe cushion. That's the same label that I gave the Peg 41, but there is a difference in the ride here. I'll get to that in the ride section of this video. Starting with the upper on this shoe, I'm going to say probably the biggest change to the Pegasus Trail 5 or the Pegasus Trail 4 is this upper. And there's a lot of changes in this shoe, but this upper is the most substantial one. I actually bought a pair of Peg Trail 4s to actually review on this channel, but I wore them casually for a little bit. I actually wore them casually last year when I was in the States getting ready for the New York City Marathon. And I ran in them a little bit, but the upper on that shoe was just so brutal on my feet. Both the material and the way it was cut, there just wasn't enough room across the knuckles of the toes. It just hurt my feet every time I put them on. So I ended up not even running in them when I got back to Taiwan, and I never ended up making a video about them because I just didn't like the fit. It just did not work for my foot. So I had reservations about picking this shoe up, but I can say that the upper textile change has made all of the difference in this shoe. This is an engineered mesh that's much softer and much more conforming to the foot than the Peg Trail 4. And my foot fits in this shoe wonderfully. This is a very comfortable shoe. I think the last of this shoe is probably the same. I don't know if it's the same last as the Peg 41 because this shoe fits a little bit different to me. It's not quite as wide as the Peg 41, and the toe box taper is a little different in this. But the volume in this upper and the way this upper material conforms to your foot and the softness of this upper material makes all the difference. This is a very nice fitting, very comfortable shoe to wear for casual trail running, casual road running, and just hiking and casual use in general. A few other details about the upper of this shoe is that there are overlays on this shoe, and unlike a road shoe, a trail shoe does legitimately need some overlays to help protect and reinforce the shoe for the rigors of running on the trail. So there are a few overlays here in the midfoot on the lateral side. There's an internal toe bumper that's supported by this external outsole toe bumper, which is great for toe protection here, and it keeps the material off of the toes. On the medial side of the midfoot, there's some additional support here and reinforcement because this is an area that takes a lot of rock hits. And overall, this shoe's just very simple, very cleanly done. Now, one thing that this does have, as you can see, is it has Flyknit on it. I'm not the biggest fan of Flyknit. I think the lockdown in the shoe is just fine. But my worry about Flyknit with trail is these are one rock away from just being something I'm going to need to cut off the shoe. I would love to see the arch lock system that's on the Peg 41 in this shoe. I think it would be a better lockdown. But as far as lockdown in this shoe, it's just fine. Moving to the fit of this shoe, I went true to size in this shoe. So this is a US men's size 9. That's what I wear in every other Nike. And I'm going to say for a trail shoe, this fits nearly perfectly for what I want. Now on Nike's website, they say to size up half a size in this. I don't necessarily see that. In a trail shoe, I do like a little bit more room between my big toe and the front of the shoe, maybe a few more millimeters than I would in a road shoe, and this is nearly perfect. As I said, the toe bumper, both internal and this external outsole piece here, really do a good job of both protecting the toe but keeping material off of the toe, which is very important for a trail shoe. Does a great job. The width of the shoe overall, I'm going to say, feels a little bit narrower than the Peg 41, but the Peg 41 to me is a very generous fit as well, at least as far as width. But the toe box in this shoe, unlike the Peg 41, feels longer. The toe box taper is a little bit different in this, so you should have a little less crunching of the toes in here. But the actual midfoot width of it across the ball of the foot is, I think, a little bit narrower, which again, for a trail shoe is something I want because I want a little bit more locked in feeling because I'm on all sorts of off angles in a trail shoe and I just don't want my foot moving around in there. The lockdown in this shoe, even with the flywire, I think does a really good job. There's a lot of eyelet options here at the top of the eyelet chain, which gives you a lot of ability to really dial in the fit of the shoe with the lacing. And just overall, this is an easy shoe to put on and go out and run some trail, run some road, really kind of run anything. It's just very comfortable, works very well, fits the foot really well, and overall, I give it a lot of positive reviews for just how this shoe looks, fits, and feels on foot. Moving to the midsole of this shoe, as I said, the tooling of this midsole was one of the big things I was curious about, but the other thing I was really curious about was the move to React X foam. So like the Peg 41, this shoe has moved to React X foam. Now, coming into 2024, I had a lot of reservations about React X foam from my experience from the Infinity Run 4 last year, which was horrible. But I can say that I really, really have come to like React X foam, and I do see it as a substantial upgrade to original React. And I liked original React. I think in the Peg 41, it's the right choice, and I think in this shoe, it's actually the right choice. Now, the React X foam in this shoe is softer, and I think it's considerably softer from a durometer score than what's in the Peg 41. Additionally, there's no air units in this shoe, so you're getting a full, pure React X feel underfoot, which overall makes this shoe feel much softer. And lastly, moving to the outsole of this shoe, this is the other substantial change to this shoe over the Peg Trail 4. The outsole of this shoe works. Now, as you can see here, the difference between the outsole of the Peg Trail 4 and the Peg Trail 5 is pretty substantial. The Peg Trail 4 outsole was essentially a classic road Pegasus outsole with some lugs on it, but frankly, it didn't really work. both from the lug pattern, especially on the lateral side and the heel, and the overall compound of the shoe. It was just too stiff, didn't offer much grip, and the lugs really just didn't work. The pattern didn't really work. But as you can see, the Peg Trail 5 is a substantial change. And it's a substantial change that you can see parallels to these two shoes. Now, these are the upcoming Kiger 10 and Wild Horse 10 that will be released in April 2025. But as you can see from the outsole design, the Peg Trail 5 now takes a lot of reference from these shoes, especially the Wild Horse 10. As you can see, a lot of the DNA, a lot of the lines, and a lot of the design language of the outsole is very similar to what you're seeing here in the Wild Horse 10. And the Wild Horse 10 is the all-around trainer shoe in the Nike Trail line. And back to the Peg Trail 5, this revised lug pattern, but also how the lugs are actually spaced around the outsole of the shoe, and the outsole compound, which is now Nike ATG, all-terrain compound, Nike's own in-house trail compound, make this outsole actually work, and work really well, surprisingly well. The performance of this shoe on trail, and not just mellow trail, which is something I don't have a lot of here in Taiwan. I mostly have just very technical, very steep, very rocky up and down trail. This shoe performs surprisingly well because of these outsole changes. So these changes are substantial to making this shoe a better trail runner, but Nike has been able to maintain the feel of this shoe for road running. And that finally brings us into the ride of this shoe. Now, I put 38.3 kilometers or about 23.7 miles in this shoe. Most of that has been trail running, and actually most of that's been very technical trail running, which is not what this shoe is really meant for. But I have done some road running in this shoe, and I've done about 10K of hiking, which includes hiking on paved surfaces. Because I bought this shoe to be just an all-mountain shoe that I can go run and hike in and really do everything else that I want to do in the mountains in. And it does that beautifully. Now, starting with this shoe as a road runner, it's going to be not the shoe I'm going to recommend as a dedicated road runner. I know a lot of people like the Peg Trail as a road runner. They say it's softer, it feels better than the standard road-going Peg. And this is a softer foam. So if you like a softer foam, initially this may feel like the better option. But for my taste, it's too soft. Now, I don't really like overly soft road running shoes, but this is too soft for my taste for road running. But additionally, this tooling in the midsole heel, this concave that's on both the medial and lateral side, I also think make this shoe very squirrely on paved surfaces, especially for a heel striker. If you're a heel striker looking at this shoe and you're primarily going to run on paved surfaces or harder surfaces, you may want to look at some other road to trail options because this will be very squirrely. For a forefoot striker or a midfoot striker, I don't think there's any problem. I think it actually works, especially if you like a really soft shoe. But overall, for a trail shoe, and I don't typically like running on paved surfaces in trail shoes, this shoe does pretty well. It does better than I expected, but I still prefer the Peg 41 for dedicated road running. Moving to the trail performance of this shoe, this is where I'm really surprised with this shoe, because this is a road to trail shoe. This is meant to be an entry-level trail shoe or a trail shoe for road runners to begin to explore trails. It's not meant for really hardcore trail running. Here in Taipei, Taiwan, the trail that I had to run is all very steep, very rocky, very technical, very much not the terrain that this shoe is really intended for, but it does really well. This is where I think the softness of the foam and some of this tooling in the heel of the midsole, this concave that's in the medial and lateral side, I think work really well for this shoe. So in trail running, especially really rocky, really technical terrain, you're often landing at very odd angles because you're searching for footing all of the time. This soft foam and some of the tooling on the lateral and medial side of the shoe really help this shoe just sort of absorb all of those off-angle landings, kind of like a big marshmallow, just kind of absorbing whatever you're landing on, but you're still not feeling it. Nothing's poking into my foot. There's no rock protection in the shoe. There's no rock plate. There's no rock film. There's just a lot of dense ReactX foam that absorbs and really cushions and keeps my foot protected, but also gives me really good footing. And this is where the Nike ATG compound, the all-terrain compound that is on the outsole of the shoe, works really well because now that grips extremely well as well, especially on rocky surfaces. I'm finding this outsole to be Not quite as good as Vibram Mega Grip, which to me is the best grip, but it's closer than it should be. And Nike's come a long way with their trail outsole compounds, and this is a very good one. Another thing you're often doing when running trail that you don't do on the road is you're often striking in really kind of any place in the shoe. I'm naturally a forefoot striker, but on trail, I'm often forefoot striking. I'm sometimes midfoot striking, and especially when I'm descending and trying to brake, I'm heel striking very heavily. And again, that's where I think the flex of this shoe and the soft compound with the tooling of the midsole that really just collapses in the heel works really well. I have a lot of confidence braking in this shoe and really slamming the heel into the ground. However, it is squirrely, but as someone who's used to really high stack shoes or unstable shoes like Nike Vaporflies and ZoomX foam that's very soft, and I do a lot of trail running, I have fairly strong ankles and I'm very good with proprioception. I know where my foot is in space. So that doesn't really bother me. And like I said, I like how that sort of just absorbs and rolls over really any terrain that I'm going down. If you're not really comfortable with very soft, unstable shoes, or you don't have strong ankles, or you are a very heavy heel striker, again, this would not be my primary recommendation, but otherwise it does really, really well. I have other performance-oriented trail shoes that are built for the very technical terrain that I have to run here, but I've been grabbing this shoe more frequently because it's just so comfortable and fun to run in. I'm really enjoying this shoe. I've got very good grip. Like I said, it absorbs the terrain and the really rocky stuff that I'm running on. And overall, it's just a really easy shoe to throw on and go for a short road run up to the trailhead, do a nice trail run, really on anything that I want to run on that's up there, which again is often very rocky, almost all technical terrain. And then, run back on the road and come home and have just a really great run. It's just really easy to put on, get out the door, and get into the mountains, which again is really what this shoe is designed to do. The bottom line for the Peg Trail 5 versus the Peg 41 is this. If you're a road runner who's primarily running on paved surfaces, probably some dirt roads, gravel roads, and maybe occasionally wants to explore like a dirt park path and maybe a very light trail somewhere, stick to the Peg 41. The Peg 41 is the better shoe for that. You're going to do fine with the off-road component of that. You're going to be perfectly fine. But if you're a road runner looking for a trail shoe, and it may be your first trail shoe to begin to explore more robust, proper trails, and you're going to do some road running to get to those trails, then the Peg Trail 5 is a really good option. So the Peg 41 is a very good road running shoe that can do off-road running just fine, where the Peg Trail 5 is a very good and very capable trail shoe that can do road running if you need to. And that really says a lot because, again, this is a shoe that really, I think, is punching above its weight as far as performance and feel on trail. And even though it's not my taste for a road running shoe, it does that pretty well too. So I'm really impressed where Nike Trail's headed with their shoes. This gives me a lot of confidence for the Wild Horse 10 and the Terra Kiger 10 coming out in early 2025. And I'm really excited to see where Nike Trail goes next. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.